All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another deep dive. Today we have a long time episode. So this is on Pyth. And today we have Lachlan, who's a researcher, writer in the space, knows a lot about them. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. Excited to dive into Pyth. Lots of very interesting stuff, and I think people could really benefit from knowing how this works. So yeah, lots to talk about.
So first off, it's Pyth, right? That's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, I thought it was Pyth for the longest time because of Python, but it's Pyth.
Okay, cool. And then, yeah, I mean, how did you kind of get into looking at oracles or working in any sense with Pyth?
So yeah, over the past year, I started doing independent blockchain research and writing for a bunch of companies in the space. Right now, I'm working with Ripple and some projects out of San Fran. Worked for like Synapse Bridge, a bunch of other ones, derivatives and everything. And at a Arbitrum Day conference in Denver in February, I met the Pyth team. And part of what I love about my job is that I basically get paid to learn about core technology, and I never worked on oracles before. And Pyth's one of the top oracles out there. So yeah, wrote a couple of research papers for them covering different topics, and really great team and interesting architecture. But that's sort of how I met them, just going to conference and saying hi to people.
Cool. Yeah. And for those wondering, I also met Lachlan at a conference. So we met out at Cosmoverse in Istanbul, which was pretty cool. So,
Good things happen when you go out and just say hi to people.
I know, right? Yeah, I was getting the Turkish coffee and ran into you, which was cool. But anyway, yeah, let's just jump in kind of how it works. I'll pin myself here. Okay, so Pyth, they do price feeds, correct? It's kind of this differs from, say, other oracles that do other things. I believe Pyth is solely focused on price feeds, right?
Correct. Compared to UMA protocol, for example, which is a more general oracle.
Right. Okay, so let's kind of draw out, I guess, how Pyth may work. So, like we'll draw over here. This is like some stable coin over on Ethereum, and they need an ETH US dollar price, right? How would Pyth go about finding an ETH US dollar price?
So essentially how it contrasts to something like Chainlink, which we can go deeper into, is that rather than having a ton of different parties coming to consensus on what the price is at a given moment, they go straight to the data source by relying on financial institutions such as market makers, who basically it's their job to reliably and quickly provide these data feeds. So they essentially connect to the API of parties like Jane Street and all these massive market makers that are known as publishers. And if you're a financial institution, you're already calculating all these numbers in real time. And you can now get a new source of revenue just by sharing this data with other people. So these companies get paid to be a publisher, they get a new revenue source. And because they're credible, like they're big institutions, if they manipulated the market by lying, the assumption is basically they wouldn't do this because they have a lot more at stake, like their reputation, legal lawsuits, and stuff like that. So it's a different architecture, but one that is pretty efficient.
So like this would be like the high frequency guys, presumably, that are trading ETH already. So Chain Street, Jump, Virtu, or whichever like high frequency guy would want to sort of publish it. And then I'm guessing you would have, so for like ETH US dollar, these, let's say there's like, do you know how many there are? Do they publish how many there are?
Probably a lot, just because there's a lot of tokens now. I
Okay.
presume long tail tokens, like some random meme coin that just popped up, probably isn't going to have a price feed right away. But for others, yes. And the benefit of this is that, as well, is that once they have a price feed for every asset token pair, if a new project launches on a new blockchain, Pyth is connected through a wormhole bridge and can therefore be accessible right away for developers. So if there's a new blockchain, I don't know if Mantle is connected to Wormhole, but let's say this new layer 2 that just arrived, Mantle, some developer is building there and they need prices quickly, they can just plug into Pyth rather than waiting for a chain link to service them.
Yeah, well, I mean, like this one, there's like what, like 3 guys or 10 guys or 50 guys? How many would you say?
Probably like 50. I think if you go to their website, it's about 90 publishers total, and I would
Okay,
presume that it ranges depending on the asset pair.
super cool. Okay, so then I'm guessing what they do is this is all off chain, or do they run their own chain, or is it off chain in some like trusted API network? And then they, or I guess how exactly do they do that? Like in sign
So through
prices.
the API connects to the blockchain. So
So is it a Pyth blockchain? Like does Pyth run like a fork of something?
it depends. So the original blockchain, I believe, is Solana, and then it connects through the wormhole bridge to all these other networks. But Pyth is just launched on all these different blockchains, so that the data can just be like streamlined onto the networks where needed, and it's just a faster process. And they also use what's called a pull method. So Chainlink or others use a push method where, say, every second data price feeds are updated, or every 10 minutes, which you can see on Chainlink's website. The challenge with this is that even if a project doesn't need the price feeds, they're paying the gas fee to have that update, and that cost gets passed on to others. Whereas with Pyth, basically the project send a request whenever it's needed for a price feed. So it's a bit cheaper as well.
So yeah, kind of back to this. So I believe they run like a Solana fork, and then all these publishers, they're not staked, correct? It's just they're sort of whitelisted by the team. Is that true?
Yeah, they're whitelisted, and
Right.
the people that are using the data, so these projects called consumers, can basically vote on how much weight they want different parties to have.
Okay.
So a new whitelisted project might not have much stake delegated to them, um, whereas someone who's been trusted and around longer might have, say, 5% of the influence on a price at a given moment. So it's kind of a weighted average between trusted parties.
So the users vote and they vote on validators, or publishers.
Yeah, there's voting on who should we trust, how much do we listen to them.
And I mean, how do the users get weight? Is it just based on how much they're paying into the system? Like, because I guess how do you pay for data? Like if you're over here on Ethereum, is there like a Pyth contract that you send money to, or do you do this off chain and send them money that way?
I can actually remember the consumers would be projects.
Yep.
So the projects probably pay in proportion a percentage of fees go to the different parties. So publishers want more users to rely on them so they're trustworthy, and then a greater percentage of fees goes to them. So the consumers basically choose who they want. I don't believe there's any reward for them other than just having a trustworthy publisher. I don't know, and also I don't know every exact detail of Pyth because I covered some pieces. It's possible something slightly off, but
Okay, no worries. I'm just wondering. Yeah, this is cool. Yeah, and then I mean we have from what I've studied, like like too, like I think this looks about accurate. And then we would say like I believe it's mainly off-chain payments because like that you wouldn't be bridging back from all the chains. A lot of the stuff, like most of it's relatively simple. And then you would have these financial institutions, and then like let's say Polygon would want some data, right? Pyth isn't set up on Polygon, but like you have this chain with all of there's constant, it's Solana, it's super fast. They're signing off on all these different prices. Pyth or Polygon users would then, I'm guessing you would rely on Pyth. They would deploy a smart contract over here, and then you could basically just pull data over to it as fast as you would want, right?
Exactly.
And like,
So it's pretty fast to connect new blockchains as long as Wormhole Bridge is connected to them, which is moving pretty quickly. They might have other ways to connect to other chains, but I think Wormhole is the primary method.
yeah, and Wormhole, I mean, Wormhole is sort of an oracle in and of itself, right?
I mean, I guess it's a bridge, right? Like it's a sort of bridge architecture.
Yeah,
So
because like is Wormhole, I think Wormhole has like a plug and play oracle piece that you put in. So like I think it's usually like it's like kind of a multi-sig bridge from what maybe somebody, maybe you can correct me. I don't know.
I thought it was primarily a bridge. Makes sense they have some Oracle potential, but maybe that's just through connecting Pyth and some others like partners of theirs that, they say on the front end we have a bridge plug and play, but on the back end maybe it's just these other true oracles,
Well, I mean, a bridge is in like, a bridge technically is an oracle. Like, it's like reading data from off your chain, but like their structure is relatively, I think it's, are they a light client bridge, or are they just sort of a whitelisted multi-sig bridge? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
There's too many bridges out there to keep track.
Yeah, like I think they're one of these like structure ones, like you can, Wormhole is like a plug and play as far as like you could pick Teller to be your oracle, you could pick Chainlink to be your oracle that grabs the data, you could pick a multi-sig, and so it like almost for users watching it, like the specific setup would matter, and I'm guessing it's probably different on every chain, just how they have it set up. But this was, yeah, maybe if we just say like really really off things, we'll get Pyth to correct us.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Okay, cool. And then is there a token on Pyth?
I don't believe they have a token right now. I think they've
Okay.
considered it. I think one thing could be the regulatory potential issues there.
Yep.
I believe I heard the answer to this a while back, it's just a little foggy, but yeah, I think projects, especially ones like this, working in all these big regulated industries, have to be more careful about this.
Yeah. I mean, you have like a fork of a chain, like you could really make a token pretty easily. Would be a nice use case.
Yeah,
Yeah, you get some money for this one, but I think um no, that's cool. And then I mean, their whole, like this whole structure of, like, I know they talk a lot about being a pull oracle, and I think, like, correct me if I'm wrong, what this means is that basically, like usually what you would do for your smart contract is say like you would wait for Chainlink to push the update and then you read it. But this one, you can basically just go grab these signatures yourself and throw them on chain. And so you don't need to wait for anything. You can just push it across yourself, right?
yeah. So Chainlink pushes the data out to all the projects it's connected to periodically, and that depends on the asset pair. And for the most part, that's fine, except for maybe when something's really volatile, like there's 10% price swings every 10 seconds, like could be a little more challenging. But with the pull architecture, it's basically like this project can dictate how often they want prices, and they just request it from us. So the difference is that can be cheaper for projects because they're not just getting this data regardless if they need it or not. And I mean, at least that's how they pitch themselves.
Yep.
Obviously, I'm sure Chainlink executives might argue that their own way, but there is a difference between push and pull for sure.
What Chainlink has the Chainlink low latency oracle coming. It's yeah, they're looking to compete on this end. But I mean, okay, so one of the things that I talk to a lot of oracles about is like whenever it's a user pull type scenario, or even the push, like Pyth sort of advertises it as you can use these prices instantly. So you're basically trusting that these guys will never ever mess up or screw you over, because there's literally no method for disputing them or not consuming the bad data, correct?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, basically, what is the likelihood of all these massive institutions that, are very public facing, very regulated, have been around a while, all colluding to, overthrow some DeFi protocol? It's possible, but, I think it'd probably be more likely to come from an error rather than some executives or developers, plotting something. So that's why there's been some pushback from people saying this isn't truly decentralized, because we always have these decentralization maxis. We can never rely on a centralized institution. My opinion is that there's room for both. I think this architecture is pretty efficient and makes sense. I also think that there's a need for Chainlink. I know Chainlink's also working on a lot of different areas, like sending data to self-driving cars and stuff through Oracle. So I kind of wonder if Pyth is going to branch off from just price feeds for DeFi as well. But
Sure.
yeah, definitely an interesting space.
Yeah, and then I mean, what do you know, like what sort of pieces of or checks do they have in place? Like this is, like if data's off, people can consume it right away. Like do they publish confidence thresholds with it in any way? Like let's say Binance and Coinbase, like they're theoretically publishing this like every second or even lower latency. If Binance flashes up to, Bitcoin is 100,000 and Coinbase is still at 30,000, like would they sign it? Would they average it? Would they medianize it? Like what would happen in this scenario, or would they sort of freeze?
Yeah, so I don't know the exact answer to that. I imagine that if a project is, a certain amount of standard deviations off of all the other answers, then they either get slashed a bit, and because it's so decentralized between those parties that it'd make a negligible difference, or perhaps they just outright don't have the data sent. These are probably design, questions that the engineers designing it had to think through. I would say that, so I don't know the exact answer, but I would say that it probably makes sense that I suspect they do something like that, where if a project is a certain amount off from others, it's either not accepted or they're penalized after.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, so because like you said slash, but there's technically no slashing here. Like you would basically just like lose your place as a publisher, right? Because you don't actually have any assets staked, if I'm correct.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So okay, cool. And then yeah, so what am I missing about Pyth? What could we add in as far as like, like I would say like the main centralization piece would be, not even that you're relying on financial institutions, but presumably there's the team whitelists and can whitelist them.
Yeah, I mean they're
Yeah,
trying to get more of these parties to become publishers, because then it's sort of, I mean, it's not true decentralization, but the more publishers that are credible, the less chances of something bad happening.
yeah,
Also, the last piece I wrote for them was about tokenization. So I believe that tokenization is definitely on the roadmap of Oracle's. I think that's pretty interesting that, on-chain treasury bills, T-bills, just hit $680 million. And the tokenization of these real world financial instruments like real estate, bonds, stocks, everything, accounts receivables, there's a ton of money coming onto the blockchain. Oracles like Pyth are also figuring out how can we be the ones that reliably provide this information, because that's a lot of money in the space, even if you're getting a tiny fraction of it. So I don't know, obviously their whole roadmap, like what they're working on, and if I did, I probably wouldn't even be able to share it. But
yeah.
I think that all these projects do have their eyes on tokenization.
Well, I mean, like the tokenization, like I guess it would make more sense here for, financial institutions to do this, but this would be like, like the hard part with a tokenized, say, treasury bill is you basically have one of these guys be holding the treasury bill in the real world, and then they would go and mint it, right?
Yeah,
Or they would say like, if there's some bank that's off here, they're holding the treasury bill, these guys verify that the treasury bill is there and then go and mint it, right? Or claim that it's backed. over on ETH.
Yeah, so actually, I can't remember the project. But what happens is that it might be Ondo Finance or one of those,
Yep.
or maybe backed. Essentially, what happens is, say I buy T-bills on chain with $1,000. These projects convert my stablecoins to real US dollars. They go out and buy the T-bills, and then Chainlink sends a message on chain saying, "Hey, we bought the T-bills in real life. They're being held. Now give this person these tokens." So that project is using Chainlink. Um, and I don't know which are using Pyth. I suspect some are already. It's just hard to keep track of all this stuff. DeFi moves so fast. But I also wonder if perhaps Pyth is a bit more suited for these areas of DeFi connected to traditional finance because of their connection to publishers. And maybe Chainlink is being used more by crypto native projects because they're probably more likely to have that whole full decentralization thesis.
Sure.
It's just a theory that I think could be true, but I'm not sure the right answer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the big question I've always had with T-bills is sort of like, or any sort of off-chain asset is like, would it be regulated in the sense that, like these guys, whether they're holding it themselves or whether they're, just verifying that some other bank is holding them. Like let's say it's Jump and they're holding a treasury bill and they tokenize it. And then they go and use it as collateral on a derivatives contract. And it gets liquidated or something. There's still a token out there, and now it has to be drawn back or, like, because like Chainlink would ask them, do you have a treasury bill locked up for us? And you're almost trusting them, right? Like this is the problem. Like I feel like this is always the problem with like proof of reserves too. Like people have always talked like oracles could do proof of reserves, but then it's like you basically are just asking them like, do you have the reserves? Like in cash, and you either have to like you kind of just have to trust them, right? Like I haven't seen like any robust auditing processes here.
Yeah, and these on-chain projects range in the amount of, regulatory scrutiny. Like, do they service U.S. investors or not?
Right.
How regulated? Do they only allow accredited investors and KYC people? KYC. But the more prudent ones are going the more regulated way. And with them, I think their teams are pretty well known and stuff like that. So there definitely is always that risk of if those reserves exist. And everybody thought that they could trust FTX and they couldn't. So it's definitely a risk. And I think that that's also a challenge is that these assets are starting to come on chain, which is good for crypto native people that want to buy it, or for developers that want to use on chain T bills as a building block for their new protocol. But the average person, like, it's probably just safer to go buy from your local bank,
Right.
So that's just a barrier to adoption that I think there's very interesting stuff happening in this space, such as recursive lending to multiply the T-bill yield, such as you have $1,000 of T-bills, you lend those out as collateral, you get a 90% loan, you buy more T-bills, you lend that out as collateral, and you're basically stacking up your yields, which is safer than recursive lending through Bitcoin, where it's very volatile, so people get liquidated. So that's kind of interesting because you can, compound your yield to different extents. So instead of 5% on your T-bill, you can get like 12% or more. So that's pretty interesting for sure.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's still risk holding bonds too. I mean, they're obviously less volatile than Bitcoins, but any of this stuff could be. I think that with those, you face a whole lot more regulatory risk, as far as if they put a clamp on this, your project like could just be zero funded pretty quickly. So
Yeah, it's definitely a risky space.
no, so this is super cool. Yeah. Anything else I can sort of add on Pyth, or like where, like what do you think? Like I think they're making this bet, I guess, that people don't necessarily care about decentralization and they want speed, right? Like Pyth seems to be like more than almost any other ones, like hence the Solana, like Solana orientation, like that speed in oracles is really going to matter. how do you see this playing out? Like, what users have they gotten for this? Like, what sort of people do you think this is going to tend more to play towards?
I think the average user doesn't have that much say in which Oracle they use. Like they're just using a decentralized exchange or something like that. And it's therefore more a question of the designers of these DeFi protocols or anyone else that would use an Oracle. Do we trust this architecture? Will vocal people in our community oppose it? And then it comes down to Pyth basically saying like this is much more efficient than other Oracle methods. It's more secure. There's less chance of exploit. To me, it makes sense. I'm sure that the people that have designed these protocols have spoken to a lot of oracles, and other oracles might have different opinions. Band protocol, Chainlink, a bunch of others. So, in my mind, it makes sense, this Pyth architecture, but
Cool.
it really comes down to the designers of these protocols, and they probably have a lot of decisions to go into it. Because one protocol might be these people that are decentralization maxis. They've been in crypto for 10 years, and other people might just be like, cool, this is efficient, whole method makes sense, trusted parties, let's do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the poll method makes big sense. I think a lot of people are going to be moving more towards the on-demand pieces versus having to wait. Um, yeah, like I said, I think it's just going to be a question of whether or not people care about the trust assumptions. But this is, yeah, no, I like it. And then we'll have to pay attention to sort of when token, because I could see that that coming too. So to kind of wrap up, we can ask. I like asking, like um, what do you think is going to be like? What's your like hot take on oracles or the future of oracles? I guess as we move forward.
Future of oracles, yeah, tough to say. I mean, it kind of reminds me of bridges where at some point we just sort of forget they exist. Nobody really cares how it works because I don't need to know how the internet works. And 99.9% of people don't care either. So we're just early days. So a lot of this stuff's coming up and it's interesting to learn about. But I think as crypto gets more advanced, a lot of the stuff's just going to get taken for granted and people will forget about it. And, there's always these Oracle exploits as well because you can manipulate, liquidity pools and stuff like that. So, uh, some Oracle might be popular and good until it's no longer, and that causes some big exploit that loses trust in the space. So definitely a need for trustworthy oracles, but I think over time, once the right architectures succeed, people will sort of forget about them to some extent, I think.
Yeah, no, I guess I sort of agree there. I think, hopefully, like once you do a good job, like once Oracle sort of figure it out as far as like this is how they work, there's not really exploits from just like implementing them wrong or using them in a bad way. Then you'll probably have a handful of ones that sort of take over, kind of like probably similar to the internet. And like there is a backbone of the internet, but the vast majority of people would never ever think about that. And it's
Yeah.
just, even if it is all AWS and it's massively profitable to be running this back end, it's most people aren't necessarily going to be thinking about it.
Although for anybody listening, this is like understanding how the internet works in 1997, which is basically where we are. So the people that do understand this also have a lot of potential. Not
Yeah,
necessarily just oracles, but yeah, I mean the space in general. I think there's a lot of potential for people. Yeah, just on a side note, I started to get people hired in this space from Web2, like my friend developer in New York in an office. And then I think people are starting to realize there's a lot of potential in this space. And you can literally work remote and get tokens or equity at a pretty low valuation. You zoom out a few years. So I think there's gonna be a lot more attention in this space. And the people that do understand how oracles work, how DeFi works, definitely in a good position.
super cool. Anyway, any last notes? Anywhere people can find you?
Yeah, I am on Instagram. I'm starting to post crypto stuff there as I travel, and that's Lachlan Alex Todd. Pretty excited to do a podcast with Ripple's CTO next week because I work for them, and we're gonna be chatting a bunch of stuff. So I'll post there, and Lachlan Alex Todd on Twitter as well. And yeah, if anybody ever just has crypto questions, just wants to connect, I'm always down to chat.
Sweet. No, thank you very much.
Thank you as well.